Ukraine is begging the U.S. for long-range weapons. The U.S. has finally agreed to send advanced rockets. But is this crossing Putin's red line? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Incogni. You probably know that companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of, and you have no idea what they're doing with it. Incogni helps you stop them. I'll explain more at the end. So this Saturday marks 100 days since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I'm not sure whether we should be celebrating or horrified. Ukraine was supposed to fall to Russia in a matter of days, but they stood their ground. So that's good news, I guess. It's kind of like seeing a kid at school get bullied for 100 days straight and saying, wow, you can take a punch much better than I thought you could. Good luck on the next 100 days. Ukraine has managed to push Russian forces out of the areas surrounding Kiev and Kharkiv. The battle is now in the eastern region of Donbas and the southern city of Kherson. Right now, Ukraine has the upper hand there. As well as on the social media battlefront, Ukraine really knows how to win over the internet. Just look at all the photos of Ukrainian soldiers with cats. There's a lot of them. So many cats. Now that's soft power. But winning over the internet isn't winning a war. Ukraine isn't doing so well in Donbas.
A city under siege. Severodonetsk has been battered by intense shelling for weeks. Now Russian forces have entered the city, and fears are growing that it may share Mariupol's fate.
Ukraine is outgunned and outmanned. It's especially at a disadvantage when it comes to long-range weapons. Now, back in March, Russia said it shot a cruise missile in Ukraine with a range of about 1,500 miles. And last week it claimed it launched a ballistic missile with a range of over 300 miles. Ukraine has warned that Russia has put a ballistic missile system in Belarus, 30 miles from the Ukraine border. That system can shoot over 300 miles, which means it could easily strike Ukraine from Belarus. Now, those long-range systems are not what Russia is using in everyday warfare. But as you can imagine, Ukraine wants to have long-range capabilities too, for its own protection.
With Russia bringing its overwhelming advantage in artillery to bear in its assault on the Donbas, Ukraine is pleading with its allies to provide it with more advanced long-range weapon systems.
Ukraine is specifically asking for two systems. One is a high-mobility artillery rocket system, and the other is a multiple launch rocket system, or MLRS. They can both fire multiple rockets at the same time, and because they're mobile, they can move before enemy fire finds them. Now, Ukraine has already gotten billions of dollars of military equipment from the U.S. as part of two different aid packages. But the U.S. has never given it multiple launch rocket systems. And there's a reason the U.S. hasn't given these weapons to Ukraine. I'll tell you what it is after the break. Welcome back. Ukraine is asking the U.S. for multiple launch rocket systems, or MLRS. It sees these as key to defending its territory and defeating Russian troops. Depending on the rockets used, MLRS can strike anywhere from 43 miles to 186 miles. This is a lot farther than the howitzers the U.S. has already given Ukraine. Those have a range of about 18 miles and can only shoot one rocket at a time. But the U.S. has been hesitant to send Ukraine these rocket systems. It's worried that Ukraine will use them to fire into Russia, which may actually be a legit concern. I'll talk about that in a bit. Actually, the U.S. isn't really worried about Ukraine attacking Russia. It's worried Russia will see this as the U.S. getting involved in the war and that Russia might target the U.S. And guess what? Russia sees this as the U.S. getting involved in the war. Russia's foreign minister said if the U.S. sent these systems, it would be a serious step towards unacceptable escalation. And Russia's ambassador to the U.S. said there is a risk that such equipment will be placed near Russia's borders and Ukrainians will be able to strike at Russian cities. Such a situation is unacceptable and intolerable. Doesn't feel so good when you're not the one striking cities, huh? Clearly, the ones who are being provocative here is the one making Russia's invasion harder. Stop being so aggressive, Biden. Now, Russia has accused Ukraine of carrying out an attack on Russian soil.
A potentially extraordinary development: reports of a Ukrainian strike inside Russia, across the border. We have this new video which shows a fire at a fuel depot.
Ukraine officials either denied responsibility or refused to comment either way. So the U.S. might be justified in being concerned about Ukraine attacking Russia. And if it's done with U.S. weapons, who knows how Russia would respond? That question isn't rhetorical. The answer is everybody knows, and not well. When the war started going badly, Putin put Russia's nuclear forces on high alert. He wanted to make sure Ukraine and its allies knew he has more than just these kinds of guns. Russia has also told NATO forces they could be shot at if they bring weapons into Ukraine. And just for good measure, he's threatened to use hypersonic missiles against any country that interferes in his war. At this point, Putin's like a more violent, less powerful Oprah. You get a nuke, you get a nuke, the whole world will get nuked! But is giving Ukraine longer-range weapons really a red line for Russia? Biden at one point thought the howitzers were going too far. At the time, the howitzers marked a significant increase in range and power over previous systems. But the U.S. sent them anyway, and, well, we know how that story ended. Actually, you could argue that NATO has been crossing Putin's red line since the war began, like by sharing intelligence with Ukraine, sending military advisors and weapons, and sanctioning Russia. There's a long list. But Putin never defined what interference in the war would be, so he basically left himself an escape route from making good on that threat. Ironically, Putin's red line might wind up getting pushed back so far, the only way to reach it is with long-range missiles. And it looks like the U.S. is banking on Russia not making good on its threats. I'll tell you why after the break. Welcome back. Ukraine has asked the U.S. for longer-range weapons, like the multiple-launch rocket systems. The U.S. worried that might escalate things and drag the U.S. into the war. But on Monday, it seemed like Biden might have rejected the idea.
Are you going to send long-range rocket systems to Ukraine?
We're not going to send to Ukraine rocket systems that can strike into Russia.
The White House later stepped in to clarify what Biden actually meant, which seems to happen a lot.
So let me first say that the those systems continue to be under consideration, so I don't have anything to preview on anything specific there. But as the president said, we won't be sending long-range rockets for use beyond the battlefield in Ukraine.
So it seems like the part in question is rocket systems that can strike into Russia. Then on Wednesday, President Biden confirmed the U.S. will be giving Ukraine more advanced rocket systems in an op-ed in the New York Times. Biden said this is to help Ukraine be in the strongest possible position at the negotiating table, although he wasn't specific about which advanced rocket systems he's talking about. But Biden also reaffirmed that the U.S. will not start a war with Russia or seek to oust Putin. And Biden will not send American troops to fight as long as the U.S. and its allies aren't attacked, or enable Ukraine to strike beyond its borders. Remember when I said that depending on what they're loaded with, MLRS can launch rockets anywhere from 43 miles to 186 miles? It seems what Biden is saying here is that the U.S. won't give Ukraine the longest of the long-range munitions. But they'll still get pretty long-range rockets, medium long, longish, longer. The reason Ukraine is so anxious to get U.S. approval for these rockets is that they believe that once the U.S. sends the systems, then other countries will quickly follow suit. That does seem to be the case for the U.K. Boris Johnson has said Ukraine should have long-range rocket systems, but he hasn't actually committed to sending any. Two officials told CNN it would like to do so in conjunction with the U.S. But if Ukraine had its way, it would want Terminators from the future to give Russia a taste of its own medicine. Who can blame Ukraine? You know things are bad when Russia is sending its own Terminator to attack Ukraine. Do they make long-range Terminators? And this episode has been sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online, there's a huge number of companies that collect your personal data. Your name, your email, your home address, your social security number, your employment history, all sorts of things. And what are they doing with your data? They're buying it, selling it, and trading it like you're a commodity. Worse, the companies that are holding onto your personal information could get hacked. Like in 2021, hackers got into LinkedIn. They put the private data of 700 million users up for sale on the dark web. That included users' names, phone numbers, and profile data. That's pretty scary. And if LinkedIn can be hacked, so can all those smaller companies that buy and sell your data. This is why I signed up for Incogni. And I discovered there were 76 data brokers that potentially had my private information. I had never heard of most of these companies, but they had definitely heard of me. Incogni forces these companies to delete your data. There are laws that allow you to do this, but if you want to do it yourself, you'd have to figure out the applicable laws, write letters in a specific legal way, and follow up to make sure your instructions are followed. Incogni handles this for you. 3 months after signing up, Incogni had already gotten my details removed from 19 of these data brokers, with 35 more in progress. And I didn't have to do anything after signing up. So check out Incogni using the link below, or go to incogni.com/uncovered. The first 100 people to use the code UNCOVERED will get 20% off. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.